Hi, if you're watching this, it means you made it through the video number 0, and that this is the video number 1. You don't get to call that one number 1. You didn't do anything yet. You watched me say things to you, which is good. Gets you in the right headspace. But let's actually learn. So I have this page, right? I wrote like 2 pages. It's the table of contents, and then literally the first thing you're supposed to learn. And it took me 20 minutes, right? But the handwriting for you, again, is just something where write down the key terms. You don't want to write down every damn thing. We're trying to remember the stories, and then we'll write out like the words you need to know in Greek so you can write them on paper, okay? So you write key terms and use your ears to listen to this story I'm about to tell you. You're going to have to pick apart, and this is okay. It's part of life. You're going to have to pick apart what is my story and what is the lesson. Now, my story is supposed to help you remember the lesson. So if the two are not related at all, I probably fucked up. Okay? But let's actually try that. So, this here, global challenges. I was a fucking history student for a year and a half. I took sociology in 2020 with a guy who had hair that looked like a founding father. This man was named Professor Schaffer. And Schaffer had really cool, interesting stuff about history, also because he was a student of the world systems theory. The world systems theory is something that Immanuel Wallerstein made probably in the 70s. And Immanuel Wallerstein's idea was, can we connect every big system in the world until we get the biggest ones? How do we describe how the whole world functions and then put those pieces together so we can actually look at it? Because what person is so zoomed out they can see all that? But at the same time, when you start looking at something like a world system, you learn something huge that you may have never thought to look at. So Immanuel Wallerstein was a cool historian for that reason. If you want to drop names that I teach you, you can, because it just shows that you have outside knowledge. But you would approach this in writing it in the way that it is outside knowledge. Another really good name to drop is Imagined Communities by, I think it is, put it on screen, Benedict Anderson. This is actually the most referenced book in all of sociology. It was made in the 80s, Imagined Communities, and the idea being people think of themselves as part of certain groups, regardless of how many literal things in their life say they actually are, right? People in America will imagine themselves to be like friends with the billionaires. Uh, Even if it's all entirely in their head. And there's real reasons. It's imagined communities. It's that like somehow you can relate to President Trump if you also understand you're like a poor person who has weird hang-ups about cultural things that happened decades ago, and he's playing to your fears or something. So imagined communities is huge. World systems is huge. I like Wallerstein, and I like it's Benedict Anderson. Anyway, those two names are cool if you have a sociology teacher you're trying to impress. Now, the global village is an idea made by this guy Marshall McLuhan in the 1960s. That's the big name you actually need to know for this global challenges. This is the first of like 3 bullet points it gave you for lesson 1, but this is the big one we're gonna try to start with, right? So Marshall McLuhan in the 60s had this idea, and he said, technology has made world history accelerate like crazy, go faster and faster and faster and faster, and the incredible speed of progress has also taken the distances we have to travel and collapsed them, made them super small, super short. What does that mean? Um, Imagine the distance you would have to travel to get around the world in 1492. We're actually going to talk about that. In 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and he found America where others had tried but not actually gone and lived there. So the Vikings found America in the year 1000, and they set up a settlement in Lancy Meadows, Canada. And in Canada, that settlement did not stick around. You can see the ruins. You can see that the Vikings were here in America. They didn't stay. They didn't care to stay. They were in rocky, impossible to live in if you don't know how to farm there. New England, God. Cold as fuck. So Christopher Columbus sails the ocean blue in 1492, and here's what it looks like to get on a boat and go across the world in several months. Gotta have enough food. If you don't have enough food, you'll not have enough vitamin C, you'll get scurvy. If you die, they will throw you overboard because your rotting corpse will fuck everyone else up on the ship. So, things are hard in 1492. They don't really drink water in 1492 because the water has like AIDS and every virus possible in it. In fact, they usually drink alcohol because it's more safe to. This is since ancient times. Beer safer than the water. But here they have something in this era called grog. It is rum that they water down about 1 to 10, so it tastes like almost nothing, like the water. But the alcohol kills whatever you need to get in your body. So that's grog, and then the food they have would be called hardtack, very fucking difficult to eat, and would sometimes have maggots, and they just right back with the maggots. Why am I telling you about Christopher Columbus in 1492 if we're going to talk about the global village? Christopher Columbus was the first person to start what is the global history. And it's because in 1492, Columbus puts into contact these two tight halves of the world that literally hadn't touched for over 10,000 years. In 13,000 years ago, people crossed over from Siberia and Russia to Alaska, to America, down to Mexico, down to everywhere. Here's the thing. 15,000 years ago, there were no people in America. 100,000 years ago, there were no people in America. 1,000,000 years ago, no people in America. There were in Africa all of that time. Humanity is over 2 million years old in Africa. Humanity is only 13,000 years old in America. People didn't live here until they crossed the ice bridge during the last ice age. Insane. You can think about other places in the world that were untouched. Madagascar, untouched. For maybe until about 300 years ago. Actually, it was a safe haven for pirates during the golden age of pirates. New Zealand, next to Australia, had no people until 1400 AD. All the Maori natives in New Zealand weren't there. No one was there. No one was there. No people. Nothing. Just wildlife. Just birds and shit. So, as I tell this story about how the world was before 1492, suddenly you have the Europeans sailing around the world and colliding with all these other countries. And as soon as you get European invaders in your country and they want to set up shop and live there, oh no. The ethics gets very, very bad very fast because we've just introduced the concept of colonial interaction, and the colonies idea, which makes it into the empire idea, is built into basically every human interaction between countries from 1492 up to the Second World War in 1945. So colonialism and imperialism, the empire, huge, 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 huge. If you're talking about intercultural communication, you want to talk as if you are thinking like a history student, because history students know the most about the world. And what I'm telling you is the broadest possible thing I can about history. So when you ask a history person, what is the difference between the modern era and the pre-modern, like Middle Ages, like ancient times, like medieval garbage? What makes the modern era modern? So this is going to be insane. This is probably backwards. I'll put it on screen. According to any historian you ask, the modern era began in 1492. That's over 500 years ago. Literally, you think about modern, you think about a computer, you think about a factory, you think about something like that. You know what's modern to a historian? Being able to reach other parts of the planet, which we literally could not do. In before 1492, you had explorers fucking walking, taking a horse, taking anything but a boat. Marco Polo went all the way to China, discovered ice cream, discovered silk, and told the Europeans about it. They got so excited about the spices, they really, really, really want to go. They really want to go to China, to India, to the East Indies, the islands. And when they try, they think they've reached Japan, but they've really reached the Caribbean. So those West Indies get named after the East Indies, and it's a weird thing. They think they're finding Japan. They're finding like Cuba. They're finding Dominica. So that's what the world looks like. And you can imagine that many of the exchanges have not happened yet. Tomatoes don't exist in Europe. Any Italian food you like doesn't exist yet. Any Greek food you like, it probably doesn't exist that much, maybe. There's like ancient stuff, but you don't have a tomato. You don't have chocolate. That is from Mexico. Chocolat is from Mexico. And so all of these different things. In America, they had no animals really. They had dogs, they had llamas. No horses, no pigs, no cows, no sheep, no nothing. And because in the Americas you had none of that, they had no big cities. They had no really big, heavy hitting diseases. And when the Americans showed up, the disease for them was so advanced, it wiped 90% of the population from the Americas without a single war. There were the wars, but most everyone in America, the craziest genocide you've never thought about, is 90% of the American continent getting wiped clean when the Europeans show up with their ick, with their sick, with their. So, anyways, I tell you about the modern era and why it starts there. The late modern era starts in 1789. 1789 is the French Revolution, 1789. And that follows the American Revolution. It's democracy in Europe. It's people being able to vote or think and do things they want, and then technology goes off and science goes off. The future starts 1789. In the 1800s, you have all the factories, you have industrialization. In the 1900s, you have the crazy wars that happened from industrialization. World War I is everyone very excited to use their newfangled machines and weapons. World War II is everyone not really solving World War I after and having to fight it again. And worse this time because there are many, many genocides and racial undertones to World War II. So 1945 starts not modern era, not the late modern era in 1789. We live in the contemporary era, and we always will because it's just what we call right now. But contemporary is from 1945. So you can see here on my paper that these are the 3 degrees of how recent we are. If you're talking about history, you need to know whether you're talking about a guy in like a folded hat, which is like 1700. You're talking about a guy in a top hat, which is like 1800. Maybe you're talking about a guy in a really short gangster hat, bowler hat, 1920s. Or maybe you're talking right now and he has a Yankees cap or something. But you need to know which hat you're wearing to talk about history, and to talk about history helps you to talk about sociology. I'm not just talking out my ass, and I'm not just wasting your time. I'm serious. This is trying to help. So we're remembering this concept, which is this idea of a global community. And the global community, global village, is once all this progress happens, the distances collapse. Instead of taking months to get to the Americas, in the 1800s, you have the mail invented by Benjamin Franklin. You have in America. You have telegraph. American Telegram and Telegraph is AT&T. And you have messages being sent in minutes, in seconds, in fractions of a second, compared to months. Literally, in the War of 1812 in America. This is when United Kingdom re-invaded the United States to take it back in 1812. America was free, and Britain tried to take it again. They burned the White House to the ground. President Madison, fourth president, took his wife Dolly took the paintings from the White House and saved them. And the War of 1812, we lost the fuck out of it in America. We don't like to think about it like that because we didn't really lose. It was a tie. There was a treaty, 1815, and because Britain is fighting Napoleon and all these huge, huge wars in Europe that matter way more to them. So they give up America, again, 1815. But also, the news that the war is over doesn't reach America yet. And one more battle is fought in the war before the news can reach us. In fact, it takes 2 weeks for the Treaty of Ghent to reach General Andrew Jackson. General Andrew Jackson in 1815 fights the one victory, really, of the War of 1812 that matters, the Battle of New Orleans. He recruits pirates. He even asks some natives to help him. And he fights off the English invaders who are trying to control America from afar. So what you have here is classic colonialism, imperialism, the stories of world history that you will encounter again and again and again and again. But playing out in American history is the battlegrounds of modern history. It was found at the beginning of the modern era, and it pushes a lot of the directions you see in Europe, just like Europe pushes the directions America goes later too. And so if you want to back up again, we've collapsed all the distances. You can get around the world in a plane flight in a day or two instead of months. Now, the last question of Marshall McLuhan's The Global Village idea, which is what we're talking about. Once communication becomes so fast that distance doesn't mean anything, does it make us more alike or more different? If we're more alike because we can all talk to each other, we have a new common language, then we are creating a larger imagined community for ourselves, according to Anderson. If we are heightening our differences, if we are noticing them even more because they're all out there to see, and perhaps we are making even more tinier, littler imagined communities. And instead of getting to uniformity, you get splinter, 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 all the differences become greater than before too. And this can happen at the same time. But imagine in music how many dang little genres there are now since the internet. And in the 80s, they were calling hard rock and heavy metal the same thing still. Like, it's night and day. So I'm going to close this up, but The Global Village by Marshall McLuhan is the idea that the acceleration of technology caused incredible speed and progress, collapsed the distances we have to travel and send information, and either made us more alike or more different depending on who you're going to ask. The modern era started in 1492 with Christopher Columbus and the Europeans reaching the Americas. This started a lot of colonial and empire conflict, imperial conflict, and every interaction up until the Second World War is probably by that model. The late modern era is when we have stuff like democracy come about, the American Revolution, 1775, the 76, the French Revolution, 1789. So going into the 1800s, suddenly you have democracy, but going into you're still fighting the kings and shit. You're still fighting the revolutions. Going into the late 1800s, you have the factories, the industrial period. And that's a very painful time for everybody, sweatshops and child labor and shit. But 1900s, early 1900s are kind of like that, but a little further along. You have the world wars, and then you have the world we know and love, the world that was born out of the 1950s, the 1960s, the 70s, and went from there. And every decade since the 70s has looked kind of similar to the 70s for a reason I would have to tell you another time. It's really not relevant. Thank you. I'm going to cut it.